Alara had always known the weight of silence from the moment she could remember. The great castle on the cliffs had been both her prison and her home. Its walls were high, cold, and carved with the echoes of generations long gone. Shadows clung to every corner, hiding secrets that even the servants dared not speak of. Her stepmother had made sure of that. Her days were filled with the quiet hum of routine, tending to the garden or sewing in the high, narrow room that was hers alone. From there, she could see the endless gray sea stretching into the horizon, waves crashing against the jagged rocks below. The wind carried with it the smell of salt and the faint hint of magic that had always whispered through the castle. Alara's stepmother, Lady Marwyn, had hidden her from the world. She said it was for Alara's safety, but Alara knew the truth. Her bloodline was different, marked by a hidden strength that Marwyn feared. The castle had been a stage for the noble families of the kingdom for centuries. In the sacred mating ceremony, the joining of an alpha king to a chosen mate was approaching. It was a ceremony where alliances were formed and power was cemented. Yet Alara, though born of noble blood, had been kept away. Her stepmother had her hidden in the high towers, ensuring no eyes would see her before the selection. Each day, Alara's heart ached with longing. She was told to stay silent, to remain unseen, but she could not help imagining a world beyond her small room. She dreamed of the sunlight on open fields, of laughter in crowded halls, and most of all, of someone who might see her, not just her face, but the essence of who she was. One night, as the moon rose silver and full, she stole from her room. The castle was quiet, its corridors empty. The tapestries that hung on the walls whispered with the memory of past rulers, and the candlelight flickered against the stone. Alara moved silently, her bare feet brushing the cold floors. She carried a small lantern, the light soft but steady, casting long shadows along the hall. She slipped into the gardens, where flowers bloomed even in the chill of the night. Strange plants with petals like glass shone faintly in the moonlight, and the scent of jasmine and night-blooming roses filled the air. The garden was her secret haven, a place where she could breathe freely and pretend that the castle's walls did not exist. It was there, amidst the silvered leaves and the whispering wind, that she saw him, the Alpha King. He stood alone, a figure of strength and shadow, bathed in the pale light of the moon. His presence was commanding, yet not cruel. There was a weight to him, an authority that spoke of battles won and sacrifices made. Yet in that quiet moment, as he gazed toward the distant cliffs, he seemed almost fragile, as if the world he ruled had also made him prisoner in some way. Alara's breath caught. She had only heard stories of him, tales of the man who could command armies with a word, whose eyes were said to pierce the soul. And yet here he was, real, standing in the garden where she had always wandered alone. She wanted to retreat, to hide as she always did, but something held her in place. Perhaps it was the way he moved, deliberate and calm. Or perhaps it was something deeper, pull she could not explain. And then their eyes met. It was only for a moment, but it was enough. His gaze fell upon her, steady and knowing, as if he could see the years of silence and fear she had carried. A shiver ran through her, not of fear, but of recognition, as if some hidden part of her had finally been acknowledged. The garden, the moonlight, the scent of night flowers, all of it seemed to vanish, leaving only the two of them in a stillness that felt eternal. The king stepped closer, his movements silent on the soft grass. Alara's heart raced, but she did not move away. She felt that if she did, the moment would shatter, and she would return to her life of shadows, unseen and unheard. "You are here," he said, his voice low but clear. It carried the weight of command, yet there was something gentler beneath it. "You should not be." I did not mean to," she whispered. Her words felt small in the vast garden, but he did not dismiss them. "No," he said, shaking his head slightly. "You were meant to be seen. Tell me, what is your name?" "Alara," she replied, barely audible. She had never spoken to anyone of such authority before. The sound of her own voice surprised her, carrying more strength than she had expected. "Alara," he repeated, testing the name on his tongue. There was a hint of a smile in his dark eyes. Though his expression remained serious, "You have been hidden." "Why?" Her lips trembled, but she forced herself to speak. "My stepmother. She said it was for my safety. She said the world would not understand me." The king's gaze softened, though only slightly. "The world does not understand many things," he said. "But that does not mean it is safe to hide away from it. Not for someone like you." Alara felt a warmth in her chest she had not known before, a flicker of hope. But it was tempered by fear. If her stepmother discovered her here, the consequences would be severe, and yet she could not turn away from the king, whose presence seemed to fill the night air like the calm before a storm. "I must return," she said, though her voice sounded uncertain even to her. "If I am seen, I will—" "You will what?" he asked, stepping closer. His hand hovered near hers but did not touch. "You will hide forever? Or will you finally let yourself be seen?" The question lingered between them like a spark in the darkness. Alara's heart beat rapidly, torn between obedience and desire, between fear and the yearning that had filled her since childhood. She wanted to speak, to tell him everything she had felt in her years of confinement. But the words caught in her throat. "You will be chosen," he said suddenly, his voice steady and firm. "The ceremony approaches, and you will not be forgotten." Her eyes widened. Chosen? She had only ever heard whispers of such things. Tales of the king selecting a mate not for politics alone, but for something deeper, something unseen. Could it be her? Could someone like him truly see her, and not just her stepmother's shadow over her? Before she could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the garden. Alara's blood ran cold. She knew the castle's Carters were not meant for wandering, and her stepmother's spies could be near at any moment. "You must go," the king said, his hand brushing against her arm, a fleeting touch that sent warmth through her body. "Do not be afraid. I will find you again." With a mixture of fear and hope, Alara slipped back into the shadows of the castle, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and dread. The wind whispered through the leaves, carrying the faintest trace of a promise she could not yet understand. As she returned to her small room, the lantern's flame trembling in her hands, she realized that nothing would ever be the same. The world outside the tower walls was vast and dangerous, but it had finally seen her. And somewhere within that vastness, the Alpha King had seen her too. She curled by the window, watching the moonlight dance across the cliffs. The echo of the king's words lingered in her mind. "You will be chosen." For the first time in her life, Alara allowed herself to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, she was not meant to be hidden forever. And in the quiet of her chamber, a small flame of courage ignited a spark that could not be extinguished, even by her stepmother's schemes or the weight of the coming ceremony. Somewhere in the castle, she knew, the Alpha King was thinking of her too, and the thought filled her with a dangerous, thrilling hope. Cliffhanger, hook, as she drifted into a restless sleep. A shadow moved silently outside her window, the flicker of a familiar presence strong, commanding, impossible made her pulse quicken. Someone had followed her, and it was not her stepmother. The morning after their secret encounter, Alara felt as though the castle itself had changed. Every corridor seemed darker, every glance from a servant heavier with unspoken questions. She could not shake the memory of the Alpha King's gaze, a look that had pierced through her years of hiding, straight into the heart she had been forced to conceal. Her stepmother, Lady Marwyn, noticed nothing at first, but Alara felt the weight of her scrutiny in every word, every command. "You must remain unseen," Marwyn instructed sharply that morning. "The ceremony approaches, and your presence is unnecessary. You are better off hidden." Alara's hands clenched at her sides. She had obeyed for so long, had hidden for so long, yet now something inside her resisted. She no longer wished to be invisible. The memory of Kellen's steady gaze and calm voice lingered in her mind, whispering a promise she could not yet fully understand. That day, the castle buzzed with preparation. Nobles from neighboring kingdoms arrived, each wearing robes of rich colors and adorned with jewels that caught the sunlight like stars. The servants hurried about, carrying trays of food, arranging flowers, and whispering about the king's imminent choice. Alara watched from her high tower window, the spectacle both enchanting and frightening. Despite her fears, she could not help but imagine what it would be like to walk among them not as a hidden shadow, but as someone worthy of notice. The thought made her heart race. She felt both excitement and terror at the same time, emotion she had not allowed herself to feel in years. Meanwhile, Kellen, the Alpha King, had already begun his careful observations. The ceremony was only days away, but his attention had been caught by more than just protocol. He saw her strength hidden behind gentle eyes, her courage disguised as hesitation. Something in her called to him, a silent echo of power and resilience he had not felt in anyone before. The king did not act rashly. He understood the dangers of the court, the politics, and the long shadows of past rulers who had attempted to bend fate to their will. Yet he could not ignore the pull toward the girl who had been hidden for so long. She had been shielded from the world, and yet she carried a spark he could not overlook. Alara's world shifted again when a summons arrived, hand-delivered by a solemn servant. Her hand shook as she took the scroll, her pulse quickening. Marwen's eyes were sharp and cold, but she said nothing. Alara could see the faintest trace of fear flicker in her StepMother's gaze. The scroll was simple. The Alpha King requests your presence in the garden at dusk. Alara's breath caught. The king had seen her, and now he summoned her. The weight of what that meant pressed against her chest. Was she truly to be chosen? Or was this a test, another way for her stepmother to humiliate her before the court? As dusk approached, Alara dressed carefully, choosing a gown of soft silver that reflected the dying light. She moved silently through the corridors, careful not to draw attention. The castle seemed different at this hour, less imposing, yet charged with a tension she could almost taste. The garden awaited her, bathed in the last rays of sunlight. The air smelled of jasmine and the cool touch of evening mist. She found Kellen standing beneath the ancient arch of intertwined vines, his posture calm, yet alert. The Alpha King's presence was overwhelming, commanding attention even without words. You came, he said simply, his voice carrying across the empty garden. Alara nodded, unsure what to say. You summoned me, she replied. I did, he confirmed. You were meant to be seen, Alara. No one else could have remained hidden for so long and still possess the strength you carry. She felt her cheeks warm. Strength she had never thought of herself that way. She had hidden, obeyed, and survived. But she had never considered that those qualities might be seen as admirable. Kellen stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. The ceremony approaches, he said, and I must choose wisely. There are many who would seek to influence my decision. But I see you. Alara's heart leapt. Me, she whispered. Yes, he said firmly. I see you. Not the girl hidden by fear or deception. Not the pawn of a scheming stepmother. But you. For a moment, the world felt still. The garden, the castle, even the wind seemed to pause in reverence to the moment. Alara felt a strange sensation, as if invisible chains were lifting from her heart. For the first time, she was more than her circumstances, she was herself, seen fully by someone who mattered. Yet fear lingered, a shadow at the edge of her hope. But my stepmother, she said softly, she will not allow this. She will. Kellen shook his head. The past cannot dictate what must be. You have been hidden, yes, but the world will not wait forever. And neither will I. His words carried weight, a promise and a warning intertwined. Alara's stepmother could wield influence, but Kellen's authority was absolute. The tension between them was palpable, charged with a mixture of fear, respect, and a growing connection neither of them fully understood. As they walked together through the garden, Kellen spoke of the ceremony, of the traditions and responsibilities, but also of something else, an intuition, a bond that went beyond politics or duty. He spoke of trust, of courage, and of the choices that define a ruler and a maid alike. Alara listened, absorbing each word, feeling both awe and fear. The sun dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky painted in shades of violet and gold. Shadows stretched across the garden, and the first stars began to appear. The Alpha King stopped and turned to face her, his gaze intense. Alara, he said, There will be those who try to define you, who will seek to control you, even in my court. But you must decide who you are, not for them, but for yourself. And for me, if you wish it." Her breath caught. The meaning behind his words was clear, yet heavy with unspoken weight. She realized that her life, hidden for so long, was about to change. The choice was not only his, but hers as well. Suddenly, a voice called from the castle halls, a sharp, commanding tone. "Alara, where are you?" Her heart froze. Lady Marwen's voice carried through the garden like a blade. Kellen's hand brushed against hers, a subtle anchor in the storm of fear that threatened to overwhelm her. "You must return," he said, his voice low but commanding. "But soon, we will speak again. You will not remain hidden forever." Alara nodded, swallowing her fear. She retreated through the garden, careful to remain unseen, the promise of the king's words burning in her mind. She returned to her tower room, her thoughts racing. Could she truly step into the light after a lifetime of shadows? Could she face the ceremony and the scrutiny of the entire court? That night, she lay awake, staring at the moonlight on the stone floor. The memory of Kellen's gaze, his words, and the faint brush of his hand haunted her. A new feeling stirred within her, a combination of fear, hope, and a strange, thrilling anticipation, somewhere deep inside. She knew the Alpha King had not only seen her, but had chosen her in a way that transcended ceremony and politics. And somewhere deep inside, she longed for that choice to be true, to be the beginning of a life that was hers and hers alone. The first stars shone brightly in the sky as Alara drifted into a restless sleep. Dreams filled with visions of the garden, the king, and the coming ceremony. Shadows of the past lingered at the edges, reminders of the StepMother's schemes, but for the first time, Alara felt a spark of courage she had never known. It was a fragile light, yes, but it burned nonetheless. And somewhere, in the quiet halls of the castle, Kellen considered the girl who had emerged from the shadows a spark of strength and hope. He could not ignore, and a promise that the coming ceremony would be unlike any the kingdom had ever witnessed. Cliffhanger, hook, as the night deepened, a figure moved silently through the castle corridors. Not a servant, not a guard, but someone watching Alara, someone whose intentions were unknown. Kellen's choice had been made, yet the shadows of the court were not idle, and danger lingered closer than she realized. The castle had changed in the days following Kellen's selection. Shadows seemed longer, corners darker, and whispers of old secrets grew louder. The servants, once merely indifferent, now cast furtive glances toward Alara. Some avoided her entirely, while others watched her with a mixture of curiosity and fear. Her stepmother, Lady Marwen, had grown quiet, though her eyes were sharper than ever. Every glance seemed to weigh Alara's worth, measuring her for threats that only she could feel. Alara herself felt different. Something had shifted in her since the encounter with Kellen in the garden. She could not explain it fully, but there were moments when her mind seemed clearer, sharper, as if she were seeing the threads of the world that others could not. The wind, the sway of the trees, even the faintest whisper of a servant's footfall seemed amplified. She caught herself noticing things she could never have before, sensing danger before it came and feeling the presence of those around her. With an almost unnatural awareness, Kellen noticed it too, during their private moments in the castle's library or along the stone corridors. He observed her carefully. "You are changing," he said one afternoon as they walked among the rows of ancient tomes. The library smelled of old parchment and candle smoke, the air thick with knowledge preserved for centuries. I did not understand it," Alara admitted, her fingers tracing the spines of books she could barely read. "Sometimes it feels as if something inside me is waking, something I do not control." Kellen's gaze was steady, almost unreadable. "It is not uncommon for the chosen of the Alpha to carry a hidden power," he said. "Your bloodline is old, Alara. The castle, your stepmother. Even the court many have sought to suppress what you were born with. But hiding cannot erase what is meant to be." Alara shivered. She had always felt the weight of her lineage in a vague way, a sense that her very existence was not ordinary. But to hear the king speak of it openly, to name it as something powerful, it both frightened and thrilled her. That evening, Kellen invited her to a secluded courtyard, lit only by the soft glow of moonlight and a few scattered lanterns. The air was cool, carrying the scent of night flowers and the distant sea. Shadows stretched across the ground like long fingers, and the faint sound of waves crashing against the cliffs below added a rhythm to the stillness. "Tonight," Kellen said, his voice low, "I want you to learn about the power you carry. You have been hidden too long, and the court cannot be trusted to understand. But you must know, and you must control it." Alara's heart raced. She had always been careful, hiding her fears and desires alike. But the thought of her hidden strength being awakened, of her destiny becoming clear, was intoxicating. She nodded, though her hands trembled slightly. Kellen raised his hands, and a faint glow appeared in the air between them. The light was soft, almost like mist, but it pulsed with a rhythm that matched Alara's heartbeat. She felt it brush against her skin, cold and yet alive, as if the air itself had become aware of her presence. "Focus," Kellen instructed. His dark eyes locked on hers. "Do not be afraid. The power is not your enemy, but it will test you. If you falter, if you doubt, it can overwhelm you." Alara took a deep breath, closing her eyes. She reached inward, seeking the hidden current she had felt for years but never named. It surged through her, warm and strange, filling her limbs and mind with a sense of clarity she had never known. The world seemed sharper, brighter, yet tinged with shadows that whispered warnings she could barely understand. A sudden pulse of energy erupted, causing her to stumble back. Kellen caught her easily, his strength steady and calm. "You felt it," he said, a hint of awe in his voice. "It is strong, stronger than I expected. I do not understand it," Alara said, her voice trembling. "It feels like fire, and yet like ice. Like it wants to protect me, but also test me. That is the curse," Kellen said, his tone serious. "Not all bloodlines carry it. Not all powers are born of good intent. But it is yours, Alara, hidden for generations, waiting for the right moment to awaken. And now, it has chosen you." Fear clutched at her chest, a curse. Something hidden within her own bloodline that could harm as easily as it could protect. She had never felt so small, and yet so immense, in all her life. Kellen took her hand, grounding her with his calm presence. "You are not alone," he said. "I will guide you. You have been hidden for too long, but that ends now. You must embrace your destiny, even if it frightens you." Alara nodded again, her heart pounding. The power was a part of her, and yet it felt as if the world had grown wider, darker, and more dangerous overnight. The king's presence, steady and commanding, gave her courage. She felt an unspoken bond forming, a thread connecting her fate with his, stronger than anything she had known. Days passed, and the castle became a place of study and practice. Alara learned to sense the flow of energy within her, to control it in small ways, guiding it through her hands and mind. Kellen's instruction was patient, firm, and unwavering. Each lesson left her exhausted, yet exhilarated, as if she were discovering herself for the first time. Yet the court was not idle. Whispers of a hidden heir, a girl appearing unexpectedly in the king's favor, began to spread. Lady Marwyn grew more cautious, her plotting more desperate. Alara felt the tension in the castle walls like a living thing, and each day became a delicate dance between secrecy and revelation. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Alara wandered the garden alone, practicing what she had learned. The glow of her energy, faint but visible, pulsed with each movement. She was careful, yet a small spark leaped from her hands, lighting the petals of a nearby flower in a brief shimmer. "Impressive," Kellen said suddenly, appearing from the shadows. His dark eyes held both pride and concern. "You are learning quickly, but the curse is not fully tamed. It can awaken at moments you least expect, and it may test not only your strength, but your heart." Alara looked at him, her eyes wide. "Test my heart," he nodded. "Power is not only about control. It is about trust, sacrifice, and courage. You must understand yourself before the court, before the kingdom, before even me." A shiver ran through her. Trust, sacrifice, courage, words heavy with meaning, and yet she felt them echo deep within her. The connection between them, subtle but undeniable, had begun to grow. It was not only the power or the ceremony that bound them, but something deeper, something dangerous in its intensity. The following day, news arrived that the court's advisors were demanding a public display. Before the ceremony, a test of the chosen's strength and readiness. Lady Marwen's eyes gleamed with a cold ambition. She would reveal Alara before the court, hoping to humiliate her. To prove that the hidden girl was unworthy, Kellen acted swiftly. "We will not allow it," he declared in a council meeting, his tone sharp and absolute. "The chosen will be revealed only in the ceremony itself. No one else will dictate her fate." The advisors murmured in objection, but Kellen's presence silenced them. Alara watched from a balcony, her hands trembling as she realized that she was no longer simply hidden. The court had begun to notice her absence, and whispers of the girl chosen by the Alpha King spread like wildfire. That night, alone in her chamber, Alara felt the weight of the curse more strongly than ever. Her powers pulsed beneath her skin, responding to her fear, her hope, and the presence of the king. She realized that she was no longer merely surviving. She was becoming a force, one that could shape the course of the kingdom if she could only control it. Her thoughts returned to Kellen, to his gaze, and to the bond that had formed between them. It was a dangerous connection, one that could draw them together or pull them apart. And somewhere in the shadows of the castle, her StepMother's schemes were moving forward, threatening everything she was beginning to understand about herself and her destiny. Alara curled by the window, watching the moonlight dance across the cliffs. The sea below crashed endlessly, a reminder of the power that lay both within her and in the world she had yet to face. She knew the coming days would test her in ways she could not yet imagine, that the curse, the court, and the Alpha King's choice were only the beginning of a journey that would shape not only her life, but the fate of the kingdom. Cliffhanger, Hook, as she drifted into uneasy sleep. A whisper echoed through the castle walls. Faint and chilling, the bloodline awakens. But at what cost? Alara shivered, sensing that her hidden curse was stirring, and that the coming ceremony might demand more than courage. It might demand everything. The castle was restless. Shadows moved differently now, whispers carried sharper edges, and the air itself seemed heavier, as though the stone walls had absorbed every secret and lie whispered within. Alara could feel it, the tension that pulsed beneath the surface of the castle like a living thing. Her powers, once flickering and uncertain, had grown stronger, but with each surge came a reminder of her hidden curse and the fragile control she maintained. Lady Marwen had not been idle. The StepMother's plotting had deepened into desperation, her schemes more daring than ever. Rumors of a hidden heir, of a girl chosen by the Alpha King, had spread through the court. Nobles whispered in dark corners, their eyes flicking toward Alara's tower with curiosity and suspicion. And Marwen, sensing her influence slipping, began aligning herself with those who might challenge Kellen's authority. Alara sensed it before she saw it. While walking through the quiet corridors, a shadow moved differently than expected. A servant lingered too long, watching her with an intensity that raised her unease. She paused, closing her eyes, letting her senses stretch outward. The air hummed with tension. She could feel the deceit and ambition circling her like predators, waiting for a misstep. Kellen found her in the library later that evening, his expression sharp but controlled. "The court is restless," he said, his dark eyes scanning the rows of ancient books. "Your presence has not gone unnoticed. Lady Marwen is moving against you, and she is not alone." Alara swallowed hard. "I fear this. But what can I do? I'm just one person." "You are not just one person," Kellen said firmly, stepping closer. "You carry power that no one else in this castle possesses, and you are no longer hidden. You must face them, Alara, not with fear, but with resolve." Her hands trembled slightly, but she nodded. There was courage forming inside her, a steady flame fueled by the king's confidence and her own growing strength. She would no longer be a shadow in the halls of the castle. She would be seen, and if necessary, she would stand and fight. The day of the council meeting arrived. The great hall, usually solemn and imposing, was filled with tension. Nobles and advisors crowded the space, their faces set in polite masks that concealed sharp ambition and hidden envy. Lady Marwen sat at the edge, her expression a mixture of calculation and disdain. Alara entered quietly, her gown of silver catching the morning light. A symbol of both her nobility and her emerging strength, Kellen rose from his throne, his presence commanding silence. "The Alpha King chooses with purpose," he said, his voice echoing through the hall. "The one I have chosen is ready to embrace her destiny. She will not be judged by whispers or deceit, but by her courage and her bond to the crown." Whispers rippled through the hall. Alara felt their weight, but she met Kellen's gaze and drew strength from it. She could feel the pulse of her power beneath her skin, a current of energy that both steadied and warned her. Lady Marwen's lips curled into a smile that did not reach her eyes. She rose, her voice cutting through the hall like a blade. "Your Majesty, surely you must reconsider. This girl has been hidden for a reason. How can we know she is prepared? How can we know she is worthy?" Kellen's eyes narrowed, the power in his presence making the room fall silent once more. "I have seen her strength," he said, his voice calm but unyielding. "I have felt the courage in her heart. She is no longer hidden, and she is more prepared than any of you could understand." Alara felt a surge of confidence. She stepped forward, her voice steady despite the storm of scrutiny around her. "I may have been hidden, but I am not afraid," she said. "I have faced my fears, and I will face whatever comes next. I will not be a pawn in anyone's scheme." A murmur of surprise passed through the hall. The nobles were unused to being challenged, and by someone so young. Even Lady Marwen faltered, her expression tightening as her careful control began to unravel. Kellen stepped closer to Alara, his hand brushing hers subtly, a grounding presence amid the tension. "The court will not define you," he said. "Your courage will, and I will stand by you, as will the kingdom's future." But not everyone in the hall accepted the king's decision. A sudden commotion erupted as an ally of Marwen lunged forward, attempting to expose Alara's secret power in a display of force. The energy surged unexpectedly, reacting to Alara's fear and determination. A wave of light and shadow pulsed from her hands, knocking over a candelabra and sending papers fluttering through the air. Gasps filled the hall. Alara's heart raced. She had controlled it before, but this was different. The curse of the hidden power within her bloodline was reacting, stronger than she had anticipated. Kellen moved swiftly, stepping between her and the would-be aggressor. His presence was commanding, steadying her. "Focus, Alara," he said, his voice a firm anchor. "You control this. Not the fear, not the court. You." Alara drew a deep breath and extended her hand slowly. The energy pulsed again, but this time she guided it, shaping the currents with deliberate motion. The light calmed, the shadows receded, and the hall fell silent. All eyes were on her, watching as the hidden power within her revealed itself. Controlled and precise, for the first time, Alara felt the depth of her strength, not just the curse, but the power she had inherited. It was hers to command, and with Kellen's guidance, she had done so. The noble's surprise was palpable, and murmurs turned into whispers of awe and fear. Lady Marwen's face paled, her schemes faltering in the face of something she could not manipulate. She opened her mouth, but no words came. The careful web of deception she had spun was unraveling, and for the first time, Alara saw fear in her StepMother's eyes. Kellen's voice cut through the tension, low and firm. "The Alpha King's choice is not a matter of opinion, nor of fear. It is a matter of destiny, and destiny has chosen her." Alara's chest heaved, a mixture of relief and exhilaration coursing through her. The court had seen her power, and more importantly, she had faced it herself. She had been more than the hidden girl, more than a pawn. She had become a force, standing with courage and clarity. Yet even in this victory, a shadow lingered. Lady Marwen had retreated, but she would not surrender easily. Alara knew the StepMother's schemes would continue, and the court's whispers would not cease. The danger was far from over. That evening, Kellen found her in the high tower, overlooking the cliffs and the endless sea below. The sky was painted in hues of violet and gold, the last light of the day catching the waves in shimmering patterns. You did well today, Kellen said, his voice soft, yet heavy with meaning. You controlled your power, faced the court, and stood your ground. Few could have done what you did. Alara leaned against the stone wall, her gaze distant. It was not easy, she admitted. I did not know if I could. You did, he said simply. And that is what matters. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to face it. You chose wisely. The wind swept through the tower, carrying the faint scent of night flowers and salt from the sea. Alara felt a connection to Kellen that went beyond words, beyond duty or destiny. There was trust, and something more, a bond that both frightened and thrilled her. Yet the shadow of her stepmother remained, a constant reminder that victory could be fleeting. Alara knew that the coming days would test her strength, her powers, and her heart. The Alpha King's choice was made, but the court, the curse, and the hidden forces of the castle were far from done. As she looked out at the moonlit sea, Alara felt the pulse of her power beneath her skin, a reminder of the curse that had been her secret for so long. She was no longer hidden, no longer silent, but with freedom came responsibility and danger. She turned to Kellen, who stood silently beside her, a shadow and a light all at once. His presence was steady, yet there was intensity in his gaze, an unspoken warning and promise. We face this together, he said quietly. Alara nodded, feeling the weight of the words, the promise, and the bond they shared. Together, she whispered. The castle was silent, but the shadows were stirring. Lady Marwen's schemes were far from over, and the hidden curse within Alara pulsed with a quiet, dangerous energy. The Alpha King had chosen her, but the path ahead would demand courage, trust, and sacrifice unlike anything she had ever imagined. Cliffhanger, hook, as night fell. A distant howl echoed through the cliffs, carried by the wind. Alara's pulse quickened. She sensed the presence of forces, both human and otherworldly, converging on the castle. The true test of her courage and the bond with Kellen was only beginning. The day of the mating ceremony dawned with a sky painted in shades of crimson and gold, as if the heavens themselves were marking the moment. The castle was alive with energy, corridors and halls brimming with nobles, advisors, and warriors, all drawn to witness the Alpha King's choice. Every face was a mixture of curiosity, envy, and expectation, but none could guess the storm of power and courage that now coursed through Alara. Alara stood in her chamber, the silver gown she had worn before shimmering like morning light. Her hands rested lightly on the fabric, but her mind was far from calm. She could feel the pulse of her hidden power beneath her skin, a rhythm tied not only to her bloodline, but to the promise she had made to herself and to Kellen. She was no longer the hidden girl her stepmother had tried to control. She was the one chosen, the one destined to stand beside the Alpha King. Kellen entered quietly, his dark eyes soft yet commanding. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice carrying the weight of calm and authority. Alara took a deep breath. "I am," she said. "I will not falter." "Good," he said, offering a rare, brief smile. Together, we faced what comes. The corridors to the great hall were lined with attendants, the walls decorated with banners of gold and silver, the symbols of the kingdom waving in the light of torches and morning sun. Every step Alara took was measured, every movement deliberate. Yet her heart thrummed with anticipation and fear. The court had seen her strength, but the ceremony would be the ultimate test not only of power, but of character and courage. As they entered the hall, a hush fell over the crowd. All eyes turned toward the king, and then, inevitably, toward her. Whispers surged through the space like a tide, but Alara did not waver. She met the gaze of nobles who had doubted her, of advisors who had plotted against her, and of her stepmother, who now stood frozen with anger and disbelief. Kellen stepped forward, his presence radiating authority. "Today," he began, his voice steady and commanding, "the Alpha King makes his choice. This is a moment of destiny, not of opinion. And destiny has brought forth one who has endured, hidden, and tested, and yet remains unbroken." Alara's hands tingled with energy, the power within her humming in response to the king's words. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of fear and courage, but above all, a sense of purpose. She was ready not only for the ceremony, but for the life that awaited her beyond the walls of expectation. Lady Marwen attempted to interrupt, her voice sharp and demanding. "Your Majesty, surely the girl." Kellen raised his hand, and the room fell silent again. "Her place is here," he said, his voice final. "The court will not define her worth. Her strength and courage will." With that, Kellen extended his hand toward Alara. The gesture was simple, yet heavy with meaning. Every eye in the hall followed, some with awe, some with envy, but all with undeniable attention. Alara stepped forward, placing her hand in his. The warmth of his touch grounded her, steadied her, and connected her to the destiny she had long feared and longed for. The ceremony began with a ritual as old as the kingdom itself. Fire and water, symbols of power and life, were brought forward. Kellen guided her through each step, his voice calm, instructive, and full of trust. Together, they moved in harmony, their actions precise, their bond evident not only in words but in the energy that pulsed between them. When the final moment arrived, the hidden power within Alara surged forward. It was no longer a curse, no longer a dangerous secret. It was a force of light and protection. The shadows in the hall recoiled, the whispers fell silent, and the nobles watched in awe as the girl they had doubted became the embodiment of courage and destiny. Lady Marwen's eyes widened in disbelief. She had expected chaos, failure, or humiliation, but none came. Instead, she saw the power and courage of the girl she had tried to suppress. Standing strong beside the Alpha King, the StepMother's schemes had failed, and for the first time, Alara could see the fear and frustration in her once commanding gaze. Kellen looked at her, his dark eyes steady, unwavering. "You have faced everything," he said softly, and emerged stronger. "The kingdom, the court, even the shadows of the past cannot harm what is true and unyielding." Alara nodded, her chest swelling with both pride and relief. She had been hidden, tested, and feared, yet she had endured. She had embraced her power, her destiny, and the bond with the king who had chosen her not as a prize, but as a partner, a force to stand beside him in both strength and courage. The final words of the ceremony were spoken, sealing the bond. The energy within Alara flared one last time, not as a threat, but as a declaration, a visible mark of the courage, trust, and power she now embodied. The crowd erupted in reverent applause, their awe and respect undeniable. The whispers of doubt were silenced, replaced by admiration and even envy for the girl who had once been hidden. Kellen lowered his hand from hers, his gaze still locked on hers. "This is only the beginning," he said quietly. "The world outside these walls will test us, challenge us, and perhaps even threaten the very bond we have forged. But today, you have shown that together, we are unbreakable." Alara felt a wave of emotion she had never experienced before: relief, pride, and something deeper, something tied not only to power but to love. She realized, finally, that the choice had never been hers alone or Kellen's alone. It was a bond forged in courage, trust, and the recognition of strength in one another. Later, in the quiet of the castle gardens, Kellen and Alara walked side by side. The stars above shimmered in the clear night sky, 1,000 points of light reflecting in the still waters of the garden's fountain. For the first time, the world felt expansive, alive, and full of promise. "You are no longer hidden," Kellen said, his voice soft, carrying both admiration and an unspoken promise. "I'm not afraid," Alara replied, her eyes meeting his. "Not anymore." "Good," he said, his hand brushing hers in a gentle but grounding gesture. "Because the world may challenge us, and the shadows may linger, but our bond will endure. You and I, we face the future together." Alara smiled, feeling the weight of fear lift from her shoulders. She was no longer a girl hidden by deceit and fear. She was a force of courage, a bearer of power, and the chosen partner of the Alpha King. The past would not define her, and neither would those who had tried to suppress her. She was free, and her strength, both hidden and revealed, was hers to command. The castle was quiet now, the court dispersing into the night, leaving the two of them alone beneath the stars. The air smelled of jasmine and sea spray, a reminder of the world beyond the walls. Full of possibility and challenge, Kellen turned to her, a rare softness in his gaze. Tonight, we rest. Tomorrow, we face the world. But tonight, you are yours and I am yours. Together, nothing can break what has been forged here. Alara felt warmth spread through her, a light that had nothing to do with her powers, but everything to do with the trust, courage, and bond that had grown between them. She had faced darkness, deceit, and fear and emerged victorious. And with Kellen beside her, she knew the future would not be dictated by shadows, but by strength, love, and the courage to stand together. As they walked back toward the castle, the wind carrying the scent of night flowers and the distant sea, Alara felt the pulse of her power one last time. Steady and calm, a companion rather than a threat. She had been hidden, she had been tested, and she had been chosen. And now, for the first time in her life, she was truly seen. Cliffhanger/hook closing epic moment. High above the cliffs, the first light of dawn broke across the horizon. The castle, the court, and the shadows of the past seemed to bow in quiet respect to the girl who had emerged from hiding. But even as the light spread, Alara felt a faint hum, a reminder that the world was vast, that her power was alive, and that destiny was never fully complete. The story of courage, trust, and love had reached a new beginning.